Colleagues, good day. So my presentation today is, I'm going to give a bit of a background. It's on the next generation digital learning environment at the Northwest University, but I'm so glad, JP, that you managed to fit me in right at the end, because this ties into what's been said the last 2 days. I'm going to give a bit of explanation what happened at EduCourse. The EduCourse Learning Initiative is a global initiative that has been for the last 14 years. They've been trying to gauge and trying to determine the influence that technology has on teaching and learning globally, but then also they try to determine what the future of use of technology is in terms of the impact on teaching and learning. So they've been issuing Horizon reports. I know a number of you might have read these reports over time. And then in 2000 and from 2012 onwards, when they started doing the surveys and looking at the data that they received from higher ed institutions, they realized that there's a change in direction in terms of the way that technology is influencing teaching and learning. Now, the change was interesting, and JP, which one is this? This one? The one that does not have a... Okay, this one. Okay, I'm just going to skip that one. There's just the reports that I want to refer to now. So when they did, in 2012, when they looked at the data, they saw this change in direction. So, the change in direction was so substantial that they decided to have interviews with the 70 most prominent, with the universities, the higher ed institutions that staff of these institutions that work with online learning, and the most prominent institutions at that stage in online learning. That's been regarded as the most prominent worldwide, globally. Now, in these interviews with the staff, they realized that there's in the past you had an LMS. Now, the LMS was the main tool through which you managed the technologies that you would use with teaching and learning. Now, in these interviews, they saw that there's a change. In other words, it seemed as if the LMS lost its function. So, and out of the interviews, then they had this think tank, and in the think tank, they saw that the LMS didn't necessarily lost its influence in terms of the way that it managed technology, but there's a change in teaching and learning. Whereas in the past you had to manage technology and teaching and learning, the teaching and learning has now moved towards a learner-centered approach. In other words, it's not about the way that you manage technology anymore, but they've moved now to the use of technology to be learning-centered. So, out of that, they issued this report that you see on your left. It's a next-generation digital learning environment. That was the collation of all the research that they've done and the interviews, and they identified and they said, so it seems as if the LMS is not going to be an LMS anymore. When higher ed institutions talk about the use of technology, they are now going to focus on what they then call the next generation. So I've just done this graphic to show, whereas in the past, Education Silver Bullet was the LMS, with all the technologies nicely tying into it. They did their research and they saw that this whole conundrum of ICT integration, it created a conundrum. Whereas in the past you could manage all the technologies very nicely and then do your teaching and learning strategy on it. There's now this conundrum of a lot of loose ICTs floating around and the LMS struggling to integrate that into the teaching and learning strategy. And then they define this, what they call the next generation digital learning environment. And I'm just going to read through the definition because that will help you to understand what they worked on. And the term pulls together the several key themes. What comes next must be informed by a new learning-centered model, because that's what they've realized out of the interviews, that increasingly characterizes higher education practice, hence the next generation. So, the focus now is not on the management of the technologies anymore, but now it's on the education, higher education practice that is learning-centered. Then, it must, of course, be digital. In other words, there's still a focus on technology, but given that digital technology has become a component of virtually all teaching and learning practice, which is interesting now. There's a shift, a directional shift toward teaching and learning, and not to technology anymore. And then it must be about learning. Since learning ties together learner and the instructor, finally, it must be an environment or ecosystem, very important, a dynamic, interconnected, ever-evolving community of learners, instructors, tools, and content. Now, on that report, they also issued, together with it, they issued the 7 things that you should know about, and I'm just going to go through this because this is a good description of exactly what the NGLD is. So, what is the NGDLE? It's the next generation digital learning environment. Is conceived as an ecosystem, a learning environment consisting of learning tools and components that adhere to common standards. Very important. So, this is not now a single solution, an LMS anymore. It's an ecosystem, and this ecosystem ties together, brings together learning tools and components. And the whole idea of the NGL is that these learning tools and components must adhere to common standards. Okay, now how does it work? The target of the NGLE would be to enable the digital environment to support learning directly. Very important. And to do this, next generation environments must address 5 dimensions. So they identified these dimensions that should be addressed: interoperability and integration. In other words, when you have an environment that applies to Stellenbosch University and you have an environment that applies to the Northwest University, the tools in that environment should be interoperable, work with one another and integrate with one another. There should be a focus on personalization. In other words, once again, the learning-centered approach. Analytics, advising, and learning assessment, and that we've dealt with because the previous presentations dealt with the importance of analytics, advising, important, and then also learning assessment, collaboration, accessibility, and universal design, and you've just mentioned that also, one of the previous speakers, the importance of accessibility and universal design. So, this is the way that this NGLD is supposed to work. Then who's doing it? The NGLD will require coordinated effort among vendors, colleges, universities, and standards bodies, because this is not one single institution's responsibility. Why is it significant? By espousing a component-based architecture based on standards and best practices, the NGLD encourages exploration of new approaches and development of new tools. And then what are the downsides? Building the NGLE, including addressing the diverse needs of colleges and universities, presents a formidable challenge. And this we all know. Just listening to what's been presented at this colloquium, I just realized, and we from the Northwest University talked when we had tea, we talked about this. We listened to what our colleagues at other institutions are doing, and we realized that the formidable challenge that we're up to, because there's such a difference in terms of the way that we approach. there's such a difference in terms of the way what we focus on. And that difference in the end it's a formidable challenge, because what does the NGDLE, the Next Generation Digital Learning Environment for South Africa look like in terms of higher education? So, these are the downsides, and then where are we going? For the NGLE to succeed, everyone involved in higher education, teaching and learning will need to break with the long-standing models and adopt NGDLE thinking, and this is very important. So, this change in direction from managing your LMS, managing your technology tools and teaching and learning through LMS, there's now a change in direction, and we now need to think in terms of a whole environment, the ecosystem of tools, practices, approaches, systems that need to tie together to provide the environment that's supposed to support teaching and learning. So this was the ELI research that they did. This happened in 2012, and then in 2014 they issued this paper. In 2017, the NGDLE appeared on the Horizon Report as a trend to be adopted within the next 2 to 5 years. In the 2018 report that Antoinette has shown to us yesterday, I've also got it on my presentation here, the NGDLE, they structure report in a different way now. The NGDLE has shifted to number 15, but the reason for that is, and I've communicated with the people, I network with the people of EduCourse, is because from 1 to 14 is all the tools and the trends that's supposed to be incorporated into the NGDLE. Number 1, once again, is interesting, because number 1, and I want to come back to that now, when they did the NGDLE, there was consensus with everyone that worked on the research that there should come something. At that stage, they thought about it, and I've just shown it to you. This is this whole NGDLE thinking. But there was consensus with everyone that participated in the ELI research that there should be something like an academic transformation coming. Because institutions, globally, they're not thinking in this way. When they think technology, they think integration, and integration that's supposed to support. They're not thinking ecosystem. They're not thinking a whole lot of tools that need to tie in to support. So therefore they said that there should be an academic transformation. There should be an effort to transform the way that we do higher education, the way that we manage. And if we do not transform, then we will not be able to think ecosystem. We will tend thinking in terms silo, think in terms of solutions, specific solutions, think in terms of specific approaches, and not thinking in terms of a complete ecosystem that need to support. So with your presentation when we started, Antoinette, I listened to what you've been doing at Stellenbosch University, and I want to commend, because from that part of what they said at EduCourse when they did the research on the NGDLE is that this academic transformation, Prof. Anton, should be informed by management that intentionally transform to move into this new direction. And I want to commend, because what I've heard, Antoinette, on the first day is that that this is the direction that you decided to go. Start with transformation, think holistically in terms of the complete environment, and that's the right direction to go. So I'm going to elaborate a bit on what happened at the Northwest University, but at this point I just want to say, JP, when talking about the NGDLE, I believe, and this is why I want to present, at the colloquium want to present on this, I believe when we think African Digital University Network, that this is the ideal opportunity for the universities that are here, the institutions that are present here, to network on determining what the NGDLE for Southern Africa or South Africa should look like, so that all the institutions together can work on interoperability and the standards needed to face the challenges of higher education in South Africa. We need to work together. One of our colleagues said on the first day, when we talk about the challenges, these challenges are national challenges. The challenges that we face in higher education is in terms of the whole community, the higher education community in South Africa. It's not the challenge that we need to face at Northwest University only. It's in terms of the community as a whole. So, how do we, for example, to give an example, we talked about and a lot of the presentations focused on the management needed to change the direction. The management approach is needed in the community because not all the institutions think in this new direction. So we need that management thinking, the way that what you have done, and I've shared with Mukhtar too. What has happened at NMU should be shared in the community, higher ed community in Southern Africa, so that all the institutions can see the importance of strategic management, planning strategically to do the directional change, because it's not happening in our community. There might be some of the institutions doing it, but we need this input so that we can get the guidelines of how we should do this. Okay, so I'm just going to skip through my slides. My time is up. Not going to because we've Northwest University Strategy. We did a whole strategy exercise. Prof. Martin Oosthuizen that had presented, he was still with us at that stage. And when we interpreted or translated the NGDLE into the context of the Northwest University, we changed the NGDLE to the enabling teaching and learning environment. So we said the focus of the strategy is the strategy of the Northwest University is not on one single technology approach, practice system as the solution, but the enabling ability that contribute towards an ecosystem of the practices. So in our case, it's not the next generation of our environment should then be an enabling environment. In other words, we don't focus on the solution, but we focus on the enabling ability of the solution. And then I'm going to skip through this, the enabling TLE focus. I'm just going to quickly go through that. So when we look at, so now I apply what they've done with the 7 principles of the NGDLE. I apply it to our environment. And what is it? The focus is not on the technology as a solution, but on the enabling ability. I've just said it. Then how does it work? And then we look at focuses on the enabling TLE that support teaching and learning. To do this, we must address the following strategic priorities. And there's the priorities you also mentioned, and this is what you are moving towards, Francie. So we look at hybrid blended learning and online best practice. Who's doing it? In our case, there's a strong coordinating role for our Center of Teaching and Learning, but to be truly enabling, the input and participation of all teaching and learning stakeholders at the Northwest University is required. Then, why is this significant? By espousing enablement culture, the enabling teaching learning environment encourages innovation with new teaching learning approaches. And then, what are the downsides? Determining and developing an enabling teaching learning environment while striving to address the diverse needs of faculties and creating a common understanding of what enablement at the Northwest University entails. This would be the downside. So we need to work towards the change in direction, and where is it going? Once again, we at Northwest University will have to create this culture, this place where we adopt an enabling teaching and learning environment thinking. So, then I just want to show this. The number one there is academic transformation. Antoinette did show it on yesterday. And then you have all the other components. And all those components in the end tie into the NGDLE, which is number 15. And then my question would be, JP, to the rest of to all my colleagues here at the colloquium, and this is what I hope that we'll be able to take into the next session, is the NGDLE at, and then to me it's the ... What does the NGDLE at in South Africa look like for higher ed institutions? So the questions that I want to propose that we ask in our session this afternoon. What is the NGDLE in South Africa, or in the Southern African region, if you want to make it broader? How does it work? Who's doing it? Why is it going to be significant to us as a region? What are the downsides, and where is it going? And then yesterday, Gerard, my colleague, he made a comment, and he said that we should be careful when we talk about OERs. We should be careful not to be colonized by the ideas coming from the US and from Europe in terms of the way that we think. And I want to echo that. We should be careful not to be colonized by the NGDLE that's given to us by the people in the US. We should determine what our environment, our enabling environment, our own NGDLE in South Africa look like, so that we can work on our own standards, that we can focus on our own scholarship in terms of our environment, and that we know that we have something that fits the context that's true to South Africa and Southern Africa. Thank you.